question now is raise your hand if you've ever learned something new about mental health from film or television. We can broaden that to media, but
Oh, hell yeah.
seeing lots of hands, right? So we all know the power of story. We've been talking about this all day. But when we look at TV and film for younger audiences, the representation is severely lacking. So only 1.3% of prominent characters had an explicit mental health issue. The number goes up to 2.1% if we're talking about implicit mental health issues. And as we saw earlier from our opening speech, 14% of youth experience a mental health condition, right? So we can see that there is not enough representation. And on top of that, the CDC estimates that only a fifth or 20% of young people who need services and support are getting that care that they need. So as we continue the day, our next conversation is also going to look at how can we harness the power of media to build awareness, break stigma, and help young people find the support that they need.
Our next panel is on mental health on screen with moderator Rick Cleveland, Emmy award-winning writer, producer of House of Cards, 6 Feet Under, Insatiable, and West Wing, which I will probably be binge watching next week, as all of us. But before that, we're watching a clip from Bel Air, and trigger warning for this video as well.
Hi, I'm Rick Cleveland. I've been a writer and producer in Hollywood for about 25 years, and the reason why I'm up here is it's not because I'm good-looking or charismatic, but in 2006 I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and at that point, up until that point, I had achieved a lot in my career. I was very high functioning, and I didn't think about mental health issues that much in terms of entertainment, television, and film. But for the next 10 years, I've watched it intently, and I still don't necessarily, I want to say, I don't think I see bipolar in a way that I recognize it in any film or television series that I've seen so far. And so I want to ask the people to my left that question, and maybe would you guys say a little bit about yourselves?
Hey, how's it going? My name is Olly Sholotan. I play Carlton Banks on Bel Air. Thank you. And Carlton is a character that in this version of the show, he is dealing with substance abuse and mental health issues. He, he's in the midst of sort of a depressive episode when we meet him in season 1. And our 3rd season just aired, and throughout the last 3 seasons, we've really explored what mental health in Black and brown communities looks like, especially because it's a subject that feels very taboo, and it's been a real honor to show his journey on screen.
Hey y'all, what's good? My name is Tonja Myles. I am a 3-time suicide attempt survivor. I've been in a mental hospital twice. I've been in recovery from crack cocaine for over 36 years. I have a mental health diagnosis of PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And I wake up every day to push hope, to let people know that you're not the only one. And just like my brother said, you're right. In communities of color, we normally don't talk about mental health. We just pray about it and put it under the rug. But because of trauma, traditions, and trust, we have not had spaces to address it and to talk about it. And so it's just good to see these kind of spaces talking about it. And look, when I see characters like that, that's not a character to me. That's my life. That's people that I know. And so when it comes to stigma, we have to do a better job. I think we come a long way. We got a long way to go. But it's just great to know that we're having these conversations and we're going to address it in a way when people see it on screen that it will not only be awareness and education, but it will be also hope.
That was beautiful, Tonja. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. I'm Joy Gorman. I'm a producer of mostly film and television, now a podcast with one of our teen advisors here at Center for Scholars and Storytellers. I've been working with Yalda in this work for many years. We started by working on 13 Reasons Why. We made 4 seasons of that show. I just completed 2 seasons with Kerry Washington of Unprisoned, which was also an exploration of mental health, and both of those shows sparked a lot of studies. And we really, I'm a mental health advocate because of my own life experience as well, and growing up with bipolar grandmother and dealing with mental health in my family. But the way that we approach mental health storytelling for young people especially is that we want to not only offer hope and solutions, but we lock arms with philanthropic organizations, with experts, with psychiatrists, with mental health experts from the very beginning, because we want to be able to show the true trauma and pain that people are going through, as well as a path to healing. And yeah, that's the gist.
Great. I know 13 Reasons made a real impact on people in terms of the portrayal of mental health, and then there was a backlash to it as well.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering if any of you guys can jump in on this one, but do you think it's become more difficult to deal with these issues on the small screen or big screen, since then?
Well, I mean, I was with Selena and her mom last night at the Rare Gala, and clearly the work that Selena's been able to do since 13 Reasons was the first foray into that conversation is proof that we have changed. The conversation around mental health has evolved in an incredible way since our show. I mean, there were very specific things about how that show was released, where it was so early in this time of parents didn't even know what was TVMA, what was PG-13, what their kids were watching on their iPads. It really was it was 2016, 2017, so I think it was very early in this conversation. And I learned the hard way that you really have to create. You don't want to, but if you don't create noise and controversy, nobody's going to wake up to what's really going on, And for every negative study, there were 20 positive studies, including Yalda's, and everything around that controversy was disproven, thank God, but that's not that's not what people publish. But I think what we learned from that, which we were really fighting for back then with Netflix, but Netflix was so young at the time as well, is that second screen content is so important. We created a documentary with our psychiatrists and therapists and Selena, and we had a partnership with Crisis Text Line and the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and it was just it's really hard to get our distributors and our studios to fund the work that gets us to where Tonja is doing the work, right? Like, we want to use our storytelling to then activate our audience to get help and help others, right? And that's where the disconnect is, It's very hard. It was very hard to try to get any impact campaign support around Unprisoned. Even though we had the consultants, even though we had someone with lived experience who grew up in foster care, who created the show, Tracy McMillan, who is a mental health expert. That's where we really need to shift our storytelling. We need the funding for the second screen content, and we need the funding for the proper consultants and partners in this work early on, because that's the first thing that gets cut when budgets are getting squeezed in traditional storytelling in TV and film.
And just to piggyback on what Joy said, and we have to address the stigma. I mean, at the end of the day, we show mental health sometime and it just looks like bad behavior. Well, let me be real clear. Bad behavior is bad behavior sometime. It is not a person that has a mental health diagnosis. For real. Number one. Number two, we have to let people know that there's hope. Because at the end of the day, we show these characters. Look, when the Joker came out, when I think it was Joaquin Phoenix, people thought that was a character. I'm like, I know those folks. I work with those folks. Or when Anna Hathaway did one and talked about bipolar, and it looked so normalized. I mean, we have to make it normal, because we think that people's just like crackheads. We think people that, are crackheads are people that are on the street that look homeless. No, I was a crackhead. I did not look like that. And so we have to make sure that as we're pushing out information and content, that we're telling the for real, but we're also, again, I can't say it enough, pushing out the hope. Because I live well with my mental health diagnosis. Now, do it, flare up sometimes, just like if anybody out there have gout or you have high blood pressure? Yes, it does. But I know what to do with it, And so as we're talking about all of this stuff and as we're learning more about the ACEs, because, baby, if y'all don't know about it, y'all should. Because, I blew that test out the water. And as a youth, if it was around and if my mama and my daddy would have known all the stuff, all the trauma, the drama, the sex addiction, the addiction to everything else, wouldn't have been because we would have known what it was. Because when the pain has a name, it makes it all better on my brain. I just came up with that one.
That was really
Damn,
good. We got to get a poster of that.
Yeah, no, you ate with that.
Thank
That's
you. That's a lot coming from you. That's a lot coming from this one.
To the subject of has it gotten easier? I mean, I think 13 Reasons Why definitely laid a lot of the groundwork to create a perceptive audience. But I know in the first season of our show, and especially being a reimagining, there was such vitriol and backlash against Carlton as a character, right? Everyone very much felt like, how dare you take this fun-loving, Tom Jones dancing character and give him a drug addiction, right? Everyone felt really, and I understand because that's a character that's very near and dear to people's hearts, but everyone felt almost violated with how Carlton comes across. But what I have found that's been beautiful, right, has been the evolution of the audience with the character. Because by about halfway through season 2, I would get people say, you know what, I get it, right? I see that this is a kid working through some really difficult stuff. And he battles with his anxiety, and he battles with, his need to cope with substances. And in that, he does have bad behavior, but he's getting better and he's working on it. And the scene that actually happens after the one that y'all just saw, he calls his NA leader and he works through his urges. You know what I'm saying? Like, we show a character that really grows from, hey, I'm going through a crisis, I need to use, to I'm going through a crisis, let me talk through this. And it's been really, really beautiful to sort of teach audiences how to love one another and how to have empathy for other people.
I'll tell you a secret as a storyteller. Audiences love flawed characters. You have to, I relate to them. I think everybody relates to flawed characters. So you have to, I think, see that bad behavior before you can bridge it over to good behavior. All right, so let me ask all three of you. Let's say I've got a show and it deals with mental health issues with a character or characters. What kind of, and I want to get somebody like Tonja to be on set with me, right? And to work with my actors. What am I going to be up against in making that an important line item on my budget?
It really is hard in the traditional studio system to get the development money before something is greenlit that you deserve to do something right. And it is almost always a battle. And now I don't know if this is because I make a lot of shows that have young people in them and don't have like a Marvel star, you know what I mean? If I had 40-year-old men starring in all my shows, I'm sure they'd be like, hire whoever you want to consult, but when you're making shows with teenagers and young girls at the center, it is harder. And luckily there are great organizations like Center for Scholars and Storytellers and like Hollywood Health and Society, Norman Lear Center, who can help provide a lower rate consultant, but I think that's awful. I want to be able to pay experts to really show up, to be in the writer's room. We should not be skimping on on this work. And on 13 Reasons, we had a psychiatrist who worked with the kids. We had a psychiatrist who worked with the writers. We had a psychiatrist on the set for that extremely difficult scene. Her name was Dr. Rana Hu at Stanford. we had to squeeze to afford it, like we had to figure it out. But it wasn't really until the controversy that everybody let us prioritize how important that was. It was always kind of like, Joy thinks she's running a nonprofit. It was like, you sometimes get a little, like you're treated a little bit like a goody-goody or something because it's so important to us. But you have to fight for it, and you have to have producers that fight for it, and your showrunner or the writer-director of your movie have to fight for it. And I think what we do, and my co-producer Reed is over there who works with me for the last 5-6 years, is we have that person identified before we sell the show, right? So I just got the rights to the Bell Jar, and the first thing I did before I got the rights to the Bell Jar was I called Chief Medical Officer at American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, Dr. Moutier. I said, Christine, reread the Bell Jar with me. Tell me if it's relevant to today in your estimation. Tell me how we can do this today, portray what Esther Greenwood was going through, and is it gonna help today's women and kids? And she said, absolutely. And when I went after those rights, I went locked arms with AFSP,
Oh, okay. So
Yeah, go ahead.
I have the answer. No, I don't. Yeah, I do. So
You do.
Yeah, I do, baby. So thank you, Joy. If Joy said it, I have it. So as I was thinking, if you guys have not heard of certified peer support specialist, so we know that in the mental health field, the employment opportunities are dwindling because a lot of people don't want to be social workers or psychiatrists because of many reasons. But now evidence-based practice says people like me and you out there who have lived experience, once we're trained and certified, because I do work with psychiatrists, I work with social workers, and I work with that person to be their advocate, to help them walk them through, their worst day, to get them to better days and their treatment plans and stuff like that. And, I can speak on behalf of people who have brains like me, beautiful brains like me, that it would be an honor to serve on something like that. And to do that, maybe the center can lead it off where certified peer support specialists, not discrediting how much you are worth, but we're doing the work because it's our passion. Getting paid for it is, the secondary. But, having us there to make sure it's authentic. Also to be there for that person who might be triggered, because there's a lot of triggering going on when the person has to get into character, I'm sure. And so just using resources like that, and like you said, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, NAMI, and so many other organizations who would be more than happy to be there to make sure everything is authentic and true. And of course, 988, I'm a subject matter expert for 988 and SAMHSA. And having all those folks come together, it would be an honor to work with any of you guys, because you already do the great work. And we're just making sure that, okay, that's for real, so.
But you guys do the real work, and I think what's missing, right, is that I don't feel that the traditional financier model understands that if we bring in an organization like yours, and you have a connection to all the other grassroots organizations who do that work, when you have put out an impact marketing campaign about that subject matter, right, you could post about our show at 500 different chapters of whatever organization you were the head of, and local people that are doing the grassroots local work know all of a sudden that there's a show called Unprisoned about people going through the life experience that they're going through. I don't know why we're not thinking of it as it's actually not only impactful, but it's a marketing tool, it's economically smart to get these stories out there to the people who do the real work.
And so we can talk more to philanthropists, like the one that I work for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was just thinking how valuable it would be to have, let's say, I'm working on a project now about a bipolar physician at a VA hospital. And it would be super valuable for me to have have a consultant with me as I'm pitching that to producers for the first time.
Yeah.
But people, I don't think, realize how much work you have to do for free when you're trying to sell an idea for a series or a movie, right? Yeah. Have you pitched the Bell Jar project? Were you able to have a consultant?
Not yet. I'm locking down a filmmaker and a star right now, but and then when we pitch that as a producer, you don't even get paid until cameras roll. So you're fighting to get a mental health expert paid, but you don't make any money until that movie is greenlit, which could take 5 years, 6 years, 4 years. So you're picking a writer who hopefully has lived experience and could bring that to the pitch and from the very beginning, which is of course a really important part, is like picking someone who actually, if you're gonna do Tonja's life, you better pick somebody who lived a life somewhat like Tonja's to write that story, but it's a lot, everybody's running on fumes until green lights, especially post-strike now that everybody's squeezing the budgets lower and lower. And the first thing that gets cut is that important work that we know is important, but doesn't look like dollars and cents in a very clear way,
Yeah, because I hate to say it, but there's sort of an ethos of good enough is good enough.
Yeah.
In even among streamers and premium cable channels. I mean, just to put this in context, I was on the first year of The West Wing, and the first hire for the writer's room were 2 consultants, Lawrence O'Donnell Jr., who you probably know from MSNBC, but he was also chief of staff in the Senate for almost 8 years, and Dee Dee Myers, who was Bill Clinton's press secretary, the first woman press secretary. They were the first 2 hires for the writer's room, and they were just there to be consultants. But that was Aaron Sorkin pulling his, the weight that only Aaron Sorkin can pull. Tonja, have you been on set? Have you worked with actors yet on this?
Yeah, I have, and also did some things with the ad council to make sure that what they were doing was authentic, and also to be that person that if anyone who was feeling triggered at the time, how to help them in that space.
Can you talk about what that ad council work was like? Was that for particular advertising?
So yeah, what it is, the Huntsman Family Foundation, we are committed to addressing stigma and eradicate it around substance use and mental health. And so we paid millions of dollars for the ad campaign to do this thing called Love Your Mind, particularly, of all demographics, but around, black and brown, men and women, youth, and even in sports. And so just to be, on that set to make sure that everything, even in your writing room, from conception to actually when we shot everything, just being in there to make sure that it was authentic and it was being represented right. For example, when you're talking about, a young black man, it was a fight at one time when I'm like, can he have a ring on his finger while he's with his daughter? And they were like, well, we don't understand why he needs a ring on his finger, where most of the time you think that black men have daughters and they don't get married. Just simple things like that. Or,
That's crazy.
But it's real, right? Yeah. Right?
I mean,
Sure.
What do you think?
It's yeah. There's a lot of battles that you have to fight that feel confusing, because you almost have to go home and be like, did I just have a meeting? Did I just have a 2-hour meeting about why he should be wearing Jordans in that scene? Like, is that like that? I feel like I'm going crazy. But I think that is, that's the work that some of us have to do, and that's the fight. And when you can watch the thing at the end of the day and it feels real and it feels authentic, then I suppose it's worth it. I suppose those 2 hours on that Zoom about the Jordans was worth it.
And that's product placement?
No, and again, it's similar to the Ring thing, right? It's similar to the Ring thing of, what are the ways in which we can show these characters as A, authentic, and B, as human, right? And there's so many different touchstones, right? Cultural touchstones that, certain communities can identify with, that, it's similar to, I've heard John M. Chu talk about Crazy Rich Asians, right? And something he talks about is the soy sauce. I might butcher this, but he talks about how when his parents first read the script, their first thing was like, why is there soy sauce in the restaurant? And no one else on set understood why soy sauce was such a big deal, but every single Asian person that watched that movie was like, yeah, there wouldn't be soy sauce. That's how those characters feel more authentic.
Oh, I see. So
yeah.
the Air Jordans and the absence of a ring is about reinforcing a stereotype.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's crazy. I want to open it up to you guys for some Q&A, if now's the time.
You just made me think of Abbott Elementary, and this is really not a question, but I'm just finding this conversation very fascinating, and also, Rick, that you're like, oh, product placement? And it's like, no, he just has to have on Jordans because, like, young black men are wearing Jordans. I'm from Chicago, too, so anyway. So Abbott Elementary, Quinta Brunson talks about the main character and how her hair had to evolve over the course of the show. So she starts off in like kind of a bad wig and like it gets better season by season. Yeah. And that's so like critical for black women because if you're watching a show, you're looking at their hair. Like you want to know, were they taken care of? Did they have, hair and makeup that knew how to handle natural hair? Are their braids nice? Are their wigs nice? So those things are super important. And I just wanted to add that. But this conversation was super fascinating to me. Thank you.
Well, I think one of the things, thank you for saying that, because I think one of the things, like, if there are other storytellers here, that is really important when you are putting your team together to tell a story. It's like if you don't have a producer that understands that you do not have a hair department without a black woman in it. There is no making of a show without a black woman who is an expert in black hair, and then also a barber, and you have to, do you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to pick a team that really believes in the authenticity from the top down, and I think what Yalda and CSS does so well is really turning to your actors like Olly and turning to the young people who are the center of these stories and be like, I know we're some old Gen Xers making this story with you, but you're gonna tell me that kids wear socks and slides now. You know what I mean? Right. Like, I remember when I first saw the costumes on 13 Reasons and Ross Butler had these flip-flops with socks, and I was like, what is happening? And that was what all the boys were wearing.
It's called fashion.
Yeah, and it was like, but it was like brand new. It was like, it was just happening, and I was like, man, they look like little old grandpas. What are they wearing?
Exactly.
But if you don't listen to the young people that are in your show, that's the really important thing.
And not only that, when your character, I mean, you did that for real. I mean, because, when you're going through a panic attack, which is no joke, and, there are certain things that happen, and one show in particular I was working with, and I'm like, no, that does not happen, or this is what you say, may I hug you, or when you went off, by yourself, like, no, I got this. Those are things that we have to be mindful of when we're talking about, mental health on screen and addressing the stigma. I mean, because there are certain things we just will not say or will not do. And you have to be mindful of that. If you really want to connect with people and you want to make it look true and real, you have to do that. Even with the Ted Lasso piece, I mean, that was real, y'all. I mean, I had to walk out afterwards because it triggered me a little bit because I still get triggered. And so because that was so true and authentic, just like when you did that, going through that. And so we have to make sure that we have that authenticity piece in there so it can resonate with audience so they will know that, it happened, it was a challenge, but, there was some positivity, there was some hope that followed that.
And agreed. And interestingly enough, with that scene, originally, it was written in a way that Carlton starts having a panic attack, and Will essentially like comes in and sort of like grabs him, and it was just written in a slightly different way. And I remember I was a very anxious kid, and so I would get panic attacks. And I remember talking to Carla Banks-Waddles, our showrunner, and I was just like, I think that the way it's written doesn't give Carlton enough agency over his own mental health journey. I think it's so important. Even just the line that he says of like, hey, Will, it's okay, I got this. I just need to like take care of this. And our writing team is so perceptive to that, right? They're so perceptive to getting our input and getting, I mean, I wouldn't call myself an expert by any means, but I have experience with it and I'm able to give input, and I'm really thankful that they're willing to take that.
Yeah, because if you'd have done that to me, because having PTSD, you fight, flight, or freeze, y'all know which one I do. And so if someone would have grabbed me like that, just saying, you know, I would have went into the mode, that the only mode I know, and that's to fight.
So you got to influence how that scene ended, that line that you added. Was that something you added, or was that?
Yeah, and it was a subtle thing, right? It wasn't. That's also the thing. Everyone assumes that this means rewriting the whole show. No, even just one line here and there really plays such a significant impact. Also, I know we have other questions. So I don't want.
Yeah. At the table, there's two at the same table.
So I'm a psychiatrist and a writer and consultant for a lot of shows, and I'm wondering. I was actually for season 2 of Bel Air also, but I'm wondering, Joy, I appreciate your thoughtfulness in terms of the development process, in terms of getting consultants in early. I get brought in a lot for shows where basically they've already kind of baked the storyline and the scenes and then get asked to kind of rubber stamp stuff, where it's kind of way far down the line about very kind of egregious issues around suicide and otherwise. I'm just wondering if anyone has thoughts about how to get the input coming more upstream in the development process?
Well, the problem there, right, is that the studio who's paying for development is they consider every dime they spend a risk. So until you have a green light, there's a whole bunch of funding that's not there yet. So what ends up happening is they're like, oh, I'll pay this writer $300,000 or $400,000 to write these 2 or 3 scripts, and you have somebody like me going, I can't have this white writer writing a script that has Osage characters for 3 years without anybody else, you know, and so you have to have someone fighting for the studio to understand that an expert needs to be accessible to your writer from the very beginning. And not everybody thinks that's important until you're closer to green light, because just business-wise, that, you know what I mean? They don't want it. Business-wise, it's smart to not spend a lot of money until later. But I always try to say, you know, one of my favorite directors, Carl Franklin, once said, like, you don't step over a 20 to get to a penny. And I think that we have to have more of the studios understand that that work is just as important as the people that you have to pay. You know, basically there are unions protecting the writers, the directors, but not the producers or the consultants, right? So they're just trying to spend as little money as possible, but you get great studio executives and you explain it to them and they'll pay.
Can I ask you a question? What about when shows like medical shows and things of that nature, do they have doctors from Jump on that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Sure.
but for mental health? Oh, okay,
No,
that's
not
what I
mental
thought.
health.
That's what I'm saying, that's what I thought.
No.
It's all health, though, I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
that is, I mean, I think, I've never worked on a medical, you probably have, Rick.
Yeah, I did Nurse Jackie for 2 seasons. We had nursing consultants and surgical consultants, but I never, if there was a mental health consultant, I never got to work with them.
Stigma.
But by the way, the other thing about mental health consultancy is it's not only about the storytelling. You know, when we had to shoot 2, sexual assault scenes, we made sure, Brian Yorkie, the creator of 13 Reasons Why, crafted a beautiful letter to the entire crew. We had a therapist on set available, of course not in Video Village watching the scene, but we told everyone we have a therapist on set and available. If anyone is triggered, if anyone has been through this life experience and does not want to come to work on the days that we are shooting this, come to Joy. It will be secret. You don't have to tell whoever you want to tell, whoever you're. And we just tried to make sure that it was a safe environment so that if someone was triggered, they had the option to talk to someone, and if they felt they were afraid to be there for that work, they didn't have to come to work.
And that's why so many of us feel like, people think it's a moral failure. Do you think that when I was a little girl, I wanted to have a mental health diagnosis or I wanted to be a crackhead? Life happened, My brain is beautiful, but it's different. And so it's things like that we have to address, because it all leads back to stigma, that part. And we have to do better, because 1 in 5 is real.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you guys, I think I'm being told to wrap it up, so I think that's it. I wish we had more time. But thank you all for coming.